My son beat me for my $10 million house, then told the nurse, let him rot in ICU. That's how I woke up on August 14th, under bleach bright lights at Mercy Hospital in Miami, ribs aching like a bad debt coming due. I tasted saline and copper, and I knew two things at once. My body hurt, and my boy had just tried to bury me while I was still breathing. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. The night shift nurse, Elena, small and unshakable, leaned in so only I could hear. He stood right there, she said, tipping her chin toward the curtain, and told me, let him rot in ICU. He's signed papers anyway. Her eyes were steady. She didn't flinch when she said it. I did. The words hit bone. Papers. I hadn't signed any papers. That house on Biscayne Bay, the one I built board by board after my wife died, was my retirement, my proof I didn't waste my hands. I could trace the roofline in my sleep, hear the dock boards complain at low tide. If you've ever carried a mortgage payoff letter in your pocket like a rosary, you know what I mean. Every receipt is a prayer bead, every tax stub a promise kept. By the afternoon of the 16th, my neighbor Luis came in, still smelling like sunblock and cedar dust. He held up my old iPhone and a manila envelope from my office labeled in my handwriting, Trust Tax. Inside, the mortgage payoff letter dated 2019, property tax receipts 2020 through 2025, and the insurance renewal binder from June 1st, 2025. Luis set them on the tray table like offerings at altar call. You're covered, Jefe, he said. At least on paper. I thumbed the phone awake. Passcode worked. For a moment. Then the cloud asked me to re-enter something I never changed. A blue bubble pinged from my son. Focus on recovery. I'll manage the house. That word, manage, curdled the way milk does when a storm moves in. He'd never managed a toolbox without losing a socket. Manage my house? Elena returned with a clipboard and a question I didn't expect. Do you want me to note what I heard? She explained there was a visitor log, that risk management took statements, that patients had rights even when they were tangled in tubing and tape. My mouth went dry. I nodded and said, write exactly what you heard. Put the quotes around it. She did. Name, date, time, the sentence that wouldn't stop ringing. I kept my eyes on the window when she left, because the window faced the bay. At night, Biscayne turns black-green like a welding mask. I remembered the day I taught my boy to hang a door. Align the hinge with a nickel, I told him. He grinned and lined it perfect on the first try. You can teach a trick in 10 seconds. A principle takes a lifetime. Earn, don't take. A hospital social worker appeared, soft-voiced but brisk, the way the best ones are. She set down a trifold pamphlet, Florida Elder Exploitation Hotline, and a pen. You can make a report, she said, and we can put certain notes on your chart. A small current of shame ran through me. Men my age don't like the words exploitation or abuse. We prefer I'll handle it. But then I pictured a white SUV at my gate. A stranger with a laser measure on my deck, and my son's text curdling on the screen. I pressed the call button. When the nurse answered, I said, please bring the social worker back. When the social worker arrived, I gave my full name, my address on Bayshore Drive, and the plain truth. I believe my son is trying to sell or encumber my home while I'm here. She didn't gasp. She wrote, she told me what would happen next. Documentation, referrals, an elder law attorney who liked paper more than speeches. I signed the form to restrict access to my chart pending review. Elena countersigned as witness, printed her name in neat, careful letters. I tucked the 2019 payoff letter under the pillow like a saint medal and stared at the ceiling tiles. The IV pump clicked. A night monitor beeped. Somewhere down the hall, a microwave door thumped shut. If you've ever been betrayed in a room that smells like sanitizer, you know the shape of the thought that comes next. I won't beg and I won't break. I will count every receipt. I will file what needs filing. I will make one call, then the next, until the house I built is the house I keep. The next punch didn't come from a fist. It came on hospital letterhead. An estimate for 18,130, tucked under the water cup on my tray, like a parking ticket you can't throw away. August 18th, Monday. I read the number twice, then set the page face down, as if hiding it could make pain cheaper. I called my son. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Listened to the chopped-up carrier lady telling me to leave a message after the tone. I hung up without speaking. A man can frame a house without looking at the tape, but he can't leave a message that says, "Son, did you try to sell the only thing your mother and I built that still breathes when we walk through it?" I opened my old iPhone. The screen was a confessional no priest should hear. 2 Cash App transfers to him this spring, $2,000 in May, $1,200 in June. Memo lines, bridge month, and job search. A florist charge from Mother's Day, $84.19 at a shop on Coral Way. The order placed from my phone because he forgot to change the card. I scrolled through photos until the meds made the images blur. My boy at 7 in a paper crown at the dining table. My boy at 12 with a fish we threw back because it wasn't big enough to keep. Somewhere that measure changed. Luis came after lunch, smelling like sawdust and sunscreen. He eased a chair close with the side of his knee. 2 things, he said, holding up fingers the way foremen do when they're going to make a list you won't like. 1, a white Escalade at your gate Sunday afternoon. Realtor plates. I saw a guy with a laser measure on your back deck. 2, your front lock flashes red when the admin changes. I noticed it blink when I dropped the mail on the 17th. You told me only you have that admin. The IV pump clicked. I opened my smart lock app. The entry log showed what I already felt in my bones. New admin code added. OG 17, 2:11 p.m. Not by me. My thumb hovered over manage codes, but the meds made my hand drift. I took a screenshot instead, then another of the device ID, and emailed both to myself with the subject line, "Proof, lock changes 2:11 p.m. If I changed anything now and he was watching, he'd know I was awake. Let him think I'm still on ice, I thought. Let him mistake quiet for surrender. Elena appeared at shift change, her hair braided, badge clip precise. She carried a single sheet she'd copied for me. "I filed the incident note," she said. "Risk management has it. I made you a patient copy." The sentence, "Let him rot in ICU," was boxed in blue pen, her initials and the date in the margin. She didn't crowd me with sympathy. She just set the paper on the tray so my hand could find it. I pressed my palm over the words until the heat from my skin warmed the copy. I didn't realize I was crying until it blurred. The hospital social worker came back with the trifold brochure. "Florida Elder Abuse Hotline," she said, pointing to the number with a capped pen. "They'll log your report and connect you with an elder law attorney. If you authorize it, we can add a limited access note to your chart while this is sorted." My chest felt hollowed out, like the inside of a hull you can see daylight through. "Add it," I said. "Please." She slid a form across the tray. I signed. Elena witnessed, her print neat as drafting lettering. When Elena left to scan it, the social worker stayed. "This happens more than you'd think," she said softly. "Men who built everything for everyone else and didn't imagine they'd need to protect themselves from family." I called the hotline at 4:32 p.m., reading the number off the pamphlet so I wouldn't have to think. A woman with a calm, teacherly voice asked for the basics: my name, my address on Bayshore Drive, the dates, what I believed was happening. I told her about the nurse's statement, the smart lock, the Escalade, the text from my son that said he would manage the house. "I'm in the ICU," I added, "and a realtor was measuring my deck." She didn't gasp. She said, "All right, I'm opening." Elena came by one last time at 9:10. She placed a pink sticker on my wristband, "Access limited," and explained what it meant. If anyone called asking about my condition, they got routed to a nurse supervisor. If anyone came in demanding a look, the chart flagged red. "You're allowed to rest," she said. "We'll keep watch." The monitor beat its slow, stubborn hymn. I folded the $18,430 estimate in half, then in quarters, and slid it under the payoff letter from 2019. That debt had been paid with years. This one would be paid with days. I felt the shape of resolve settle in the room like a piece of furniture that finally found the right wall. I wasn't ready to fight. Fighting was what got me on the floor of the boathouse stairs. I was ready to file. On the screen, the lock log blinked 2:11 p. Again, as if to taunt me. I saved the screenshot to a folder I'd just named Bay House Proof and sent it to my own email and to a blank draft addressed to no one. Belt and suspenders, the old carpenter's way. I closed my eyes and pictured the dock. The tide lifts and then it lets go. You don't argue with water, you brace, you measure, you mark. Tomorrow would be the call to the bank, the appointment confirmation, the binder cracked open like a hymnal. Tonight, grief got its hour. Then the paperwork would begin. The morning of August 20th came sharp and clean, the kind of Miami light that hits the blinds like a flashbulb. I sat up in the hospital bed, every muscle stiff, but my mind clear for the first time in days. Today, I'd start turning pain into paperwork. Elena brought me black coffee she wasn't supposed to. For your blood pressure, not the rules, she said, and helped me into the visitor's chair with my envelope of documents. At 10:45 a.m., a woman in a navy blazer and glasses that caught the light stepped in. "Mr. Tiggy, I'm Marisol Vega, elder law attorney. Let's talk about your son." Her tone wasn't cruel, just precise. I told her everything, the nurse's words, the lock change at 2:11 p.m., the escalade at my gate, the text, "I'll manage the house." She didn't interrupt, just kept jotting with a pen that clicked quietly like a metronome for control. When I finished, she leaned back. "All right," she said, "he's moving fast but sloppily. That's to your advantage. We're going to slow the river." She opened her briefcase, pulled out a tablet and logged into title search Miami. "No transfer filed," she said, scrolling, "but here, an open title inquiry dated August 17th. Someone's fishing, we'll plant a flag." She drafted a notice of interest, a legal cloud that warns anyone thinking about the property that it's contested. "This buys you time," she explained. "He can't close on anything without running into me." Then she outlined the next steps. An injunction petition against unauthorized control, a temporary freeze request to the bank, and, her favorite phrase, a paper moat. "I like moats," I said. She smiled. "Good, because we're digging one today." Before she left, she gave me a card for a private investigator, Jonah Reed, and said, "Hire him, quietly, 3,000 retainer. He'll track who your son meets and when." At 1:15 p.m., I called Jonah from the hospital's family lounge. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was calm, steady, used to bad news. "Send me the name, address, and anyone connected," he said. "I'll start by tailing him through Bayshore and the Grove." I transferred the $3,000 retainer while we talked, emailed him the photo of the escalade Luis described, and attached a note, "Find the realtor. Confirm any listing." By evening, I'd made one more call. To Seabreeze Financial, my bank's fraud division. The woman on the other end, Investigator Ortiz, spoke like a cop who'd seen too many excuses. "We can't freeze an entire account," she said, "but we can flag it. If a property loan hits your record, we'll hold it until we speak with you." "Flag it," I said, "please. Any lien, any collateralization, put eyes on it." She made a note, read it back to me, and added, "You're not the first father to make this call. I wish you were." That night, Luis met me at the hospital with my safe deposit key, the one from the brass hook in the kitchen. "You sure?" he asked. "I'm sure." We drove to the branch together the next morning, August 21st. The vault smelled like cold metal and trust. Inside my box was everything that still proved who I was. My wife's wedding ring, the original, living trust, and an old folded letter in my handwriting addressed to my son. I'd written it years ago after an argument about money. "Respect doesn't bend," it said. I ran my thumb over the words. Still true. Luis slid the trust copy into a plastic sleeve and locked it back inside. "So what now?" he asked. "Now," I said, "we let paper talk louder than blood." By evening, Jonah had already texted 10:06 a.m., AUG 22. "Your son spotted at Bayshore title with woman in grey suit. Looked like a realtor. Took folder labeled seller packet. And photos attached." I clicked each image slowly. There he was, my boy, dressed like he'd learned confidence from YouTube, smiling over documents that bore my address, my house number in the header, my name misspelled on the form. I sent the photos to Marisol with one line, "He's moving fast." Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Then so are we. Notary arriving in the morning. Bring everything you've got." I stared at the hospital clock. 11:42 p.m. I hadn't slept more than an hour a night since the fall, but tonight, something steadier than fear kept me awake. I reached for the file folder Elena had left by my bed. The affidavit she'd drafted, the one with "let him rot in ICU" in quotation marks, was signed, dated, notarized. Proof that cruelty doesn't vanish when the monitor flatlines. I put it on top of the stack with the mortgage payoff letter, property tax receipts, and the insurance binder from June. I laid them in order by date, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, and pressed them flat with both palms. The paper felt heavier than any hammer I'd ever swung. The next morning, when the notary's stamp clapped down and the ink spread into the fibers, I realized I'd just built the first wall of that moat Marisol promised. And for the first time since the fall, I could breathe. Because now my revenge had a filing number. You don't have to swing a hammer to make noise. Sometimes a quiet email can shake the ground harder than any blow. On August 23rd, it began. My slow, lawful revenge. I was back home that morning. Metal oil clung to my hands for hours. As he packed up, the locksmith said, "Looks like someone already swapped these once last week." He pointed to the scratches on the brass plate. I nodded. "That's why you're here." When he left, I sat at the kitchen table and laid everything out like a ritual. The freeze memo from Ortiz, the photos from Jonah, the certified mail receipts, the locksmith invoice, the AV Tech crumpled bill. Every document told the same story. A man stripped of trust, building it back one notarized page at a time. That night, my phone pinged with an email from Bayshore title, forwarded by Marisol. The subject, "Rushed seller packet." Attached was a PDF of the fake documents. My name was there, scrawled across the bottom, dated August 15th, the day after I fell down those boathouse stairs. The handwriting was wrong, slanted left, hesitant. My boy never noticed that when I taught him to write his name. I told him pressure comes from the top, not the wrist. He must have tried to fake my stroke, but he forgot the rhythm. I sat there staring at the screen until the glow went cold. Then I printed it, marked it in red pen, forgery. By midnight, I'd spread every piece of paper across the dining table like shingles on a roof, each page overlapping the next. Proof layered upon proof. Luis walked in quietly and watched from the doorway. "What are you building?" he asked. "A storm shelter," I said, "because when your own blood tries to wash you away, paper is the only wall that doesn't rot. And by the time that sun rose over Biscayne Bay, my moat was finished, quiet, invisible, and deadly precise." He showed up with a smile and a tape measure. I answered with affidavits. It was August 27th, a humid Wednesday that smelled of rain and salt. I was sitting on the porch, coffee in one hand, the notice of lis pendens in the other, when a white SUV turned onto my driveway. The tires crunched over the crushed seashells I'd laid there myself 15 years ago. My son stepped out wearing mirrored sunglasses and a polo that probably cost more than the first truck I ever owned. Beside him was a realtor, tall woman, clipboard in hand, the kind of smile people practice in seminars about motivated sellers. She waved like we were all about to have a nice chat. "Morning, Dad," he called out, voice bright as bleach. "Just here for a quick look around." I stayed seated. "For what?" The appraisal, he said. You know, for when you relocate. Behind him, the realtor took out her tape measure and started stretching it along the porch railing like she'd already listed the place. I didn't raise my voice. I just reached into the folder on my lap, pulled out my phone, and put Marisol Vega on speaker. This is Attorney Vega. Her voice came through crisp, like a hammer on a nail. Before you proceed, please note that this property is under active lis pendens litigation. Any appraisal, marketing, or listing activity without written consent from Mr. Jume is a violation of Florida statute. The realtor froze mid-measure. Oh, she said. I wasn't aware. I imagine you weren't, Marisol said evenly. But now you are. My son's jaw tightened. Dad, come on, he said. You signed the quitclaim. You just don't remember. I set the paper on the table between us, a certified copy of my trust, notarized and sealed, with my name as trustee and beneficiary. Then the insurance binder, renewed June 1st, 2025, with me as the sole named insured. Show me where I signed anything else, I said. He opened his mouth, but the words didn't arrive. At that moment, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Elena, the ICU nurse, stood there in civilian clothes, holding a folded paper close to her chest. You said you'd need this someday, she said softly. Her hands trembled as she gave me the affidavit. Notarized with her full statement, on August 14, 2025, I heard the patient's son say, "Let him rot in ICU. He signed papers anyway." Her voice cracked a little when she said, "It's all there, date, time, my license number." I hope it helps. It does, I said. More than you know. Luis, who'd been leaning on the porch post, stepped forward. I saw his realtor at the gate on the 17th, he added. Middle of the day, measuring the dock. You want me to swear to that? Yes, I said. Please. I pulled out a legal pad and wrote it down while my son's face flushed red. A notification buzzed on my phone. Email from hardmoneylenders.com. Subject revised terms. But before I could open it, Ortiz from the bank called. Don't worry, she said. We intercepted it. The freeze triggered automatically. No funds released. Behind me, the bay wind rattled the window glass. My son turned toward the realtor, muttering something about misunderstanding. She looked at him the way people do when they realize they're standing on the wrong side of a story. Marisol's voice cut through the air again. We'll be filing an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order this afternoon. If your son has any further contact with the property without counsel present, we'll pursue sanctions. He ripped off his sunglasses, eyes sharp. You don't get to humiliate me like this, he hissed. I stood, the porch boards groaning under me. You did that yourself, son. He turned, stalked back to the SUV and slammed the door. The realtor lingered, then offered a half-hearted, good luck, Mr. Kuhn, before leaving, as the engine noise faded down the road. Elena whispered, I'm sorry it came to this. I looked at her affidavit again. The line she'd underlined in blue ink, let him rot in ICU. Don't be, I said. You told the truth. That's the beginning of everything good. By sunset, Marisol texted, TRO hearing set for Friday. Subpoenas issued to Bayshore Title, Realtor, and Ortiz. Bring originals. I spent that night in the dining room, spreading out the folders one more time. The blue-backed exhibits were stacked and labeled. Exhibit A, Mortgage Payoff, 2019. Exhibit B, Property Tax Receipts, 2020-2025. Exhibit C, Insurance Binder. Exhibit D, Nurse Affidavit. Exhibit E, Title Inquiry Log. Exhibit F, Locksmith Invoice. My old carpenter's pencil lay across the top of the pile, blunt and solid. The same one I used to mark joists when I built the foundation 20 years ago. I ran my thumb over it and whispered, straight lines only, because the next time I saw my son, it wouldn't be on the porch. It would be under oath, and this time I wouldn't raise my hand to him. I'd raise receipts. The twist wasn't a smoking gun. It was a missing one. The night before the court hearing, September 1st, 2025, the bay outside my window looked like oil, slick, dark, waiting to catch a spark. I was at the dining table again, reviewing every document one last time. My hands still smelled of ink and printer toner. That's when my phone buzzed. "Jonah, my private investigator. Got something," he said. "Your son's at the Palms Hotel, rooftop bar, with a title runner, woman in red jacket." He handed her an envelope. Looked thin, not cash. It could be docs. I gripped the receiver tighter. "You get photos?" "Yeah, time-stamped 8:42 p.m. sending now." 3 images came through, grainy but clear enough to make my stomach drop. My son leaning back in his chair, relaxed, laughing. The woman across from him, holding what looked like a folder marked Bayshore title, a handoff, a handshake, then 2 martinis raised like a toast to deceit. Jonah added, "No law broken, but if he's passing docs that reference your property, it's all bad optics. Keep that in your back pocket for court, bad optics." Lawyers love that phrase. It means he's guilty in the court of common sense. I thanked him and sat there staring at the photos. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the kitchen clock and the faint hum of the fridge. The stillness felt heavier than noise. Around 11:30, I walked room to room with a folder under my arm. The same folder I'd bring to court tomorrow. Every paper inside was a heartbeat. Freeze memo from Ortiz, Elena's affidavit, locksmith invoice, photo evidence, Liz Pendon's filing, rush cellar packet, with my fake signature, dated August 15th, the day after I fell. Marisol had told me earlier that afternoon, "We don't win by yelling. We win by sequence." She drilled me for an hour, what to say, what not to say. If you don't remember something, don't guess. If you do remember, don't soften it. Her calm had a surgeon's edge. She ended the call with, "Bring your binder. Bring the original trust. Bring that pencil too. You'll want something to hold." Before midnight, I checked my smart lock app out of habit. The entry log flashed something I hadn't seen before. 2:03 a.m. gate ping. Fob access. The hairs on my arms lifted. I hadn't used my gate fob since the day I was discharged. The last one I gave out was years ago, to my son. I opened the camera feed. It was dark, pixelated, but there, a faint shadow crossing the porch. The camera caught just enough light from the bay to frame a sneaker toe and the hem of dark slacks. A slice of suit pants I knew from memory. He'd come again under cover of night, probably thinking I was asleep or dead, but he hadn't realized that I had already replaced the locks, reset the codes, filed the papers, and surrounded myself with people who believed me. That was the twist. The game he thought he was still winning had ended a week ago. At dawn, the house smelled of salt and coffee. Luis knocked softly on the front door. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. "As I'll ever be." We drove downtown in silence. The folder sat on my lap like a living thing. The courthouse rose over the palm trees, concrete gray and indifferent. Marisol met us on the steps in a navy suit, hair pulled back. "Jonah sent me those hotel photos," she said quietly. "They're not illegal, but they're telling. If the judge asks about intent, we'll show them." We entered through the metal detectors. The guard looked at my binder and smiled faintly. "Big case?" "Just a house," I said. "And what's left of a family." Inside the courtroom lobby, the air conditioning bit through my shirt. Marisol handed me a post-it with a single note. "Stay calm. Paper first, emotion later." Across the hallway I saw my son, fresh suit, slick hair, phone in hand. He looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe betrayal shrinks a man from the inside. He met my eyes for a second, then turned away to whisper something to his lawyer. The younger man nodded, too eager, too rehearsed. I didn't feel anger anymore, just precision. In my folder, I slipped the hotel photos behind the rush cellar packet, a quiet setup for tomorrow's blow. That was my insurance. As I left the courthouse lobby that evening, I paused on the steps. The air tasted like coming rain. I looked out toward Biscayne Bay, where the sky was the same bruised color as the water. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., Judge Arroyo would call our case. The world would see what management really looked like when a son tried to sell his father's life behind a signature forged with love long gone. I whispered to myself, "You built this house with a hammer. Now you'll keep it with a pen." and for the first time in weeks, I felt ready for war, the lawful kind. September 3rd, 2025, 10:06 a.m., Miami-Dade Civil. The courtroom smelled like old coffee and paper, like a library that had learned to hold grudges. I walked in, with my binder hugged to my chest, the edges of the blue-backed exhibits visible like teeth. Marisol wore a navy suit that made her look like a ship's captain. Louise stayed behind me, shoulders set like a post. Jonas slipped into the back row with a camera that didn't flash. The bailiff called the case. Judge Arroyo looked older than his robe suggested, with the kind of eyes that could tell if you were lying before you opened your mouth. Case number 2025 CIV 7842, he read, then glanced at me. Mr., are you ready to proceed? I felt the binder warm under my palm. Yes, Your Honor, I said, and the sound of my own voice surprised me, steady, not brittle. My son's lawyer opened first, voice practiced, polite. Your Honor, my client contends that his father executed a quitclaim. The elder is confused, and we ask the court to consider his capacity. He smiled at the room like a man tenderly pointing out a bad paint job. Marisol stood like a ship's mast and unsheathed the timeline. We will show the court there is no valid quitclaim. We will show the court an active pattern of attempted exploitation beginning August 14th and culminating in rushed seller documents dated August 15th, documents bearing a signature that is inconsistent with Mr.'s natural handwriting. She tapped the exhibit list. We will present eyewitness testimony, bank freeze memos, title company correspondence, and affidavits. Judge Arroyo nodded. Proceed. I took the stand because I wanted to be the one to tell it, not some paper that read like a verdict. I sat, feeling the leather, and began the thing my heart had rehearsed 100 times. Your Honor, I said, I'm 72 years old. I built houses my whole life. I know the smell of wet wood and the weight of a joist. This house on Bayshore Drive is my retirement. It's the last thing my wife and I built together after she died. On August 14th, while recovering at Mercy Hospital from a fall at the boathouse stairs, I learned my son told a nurse, "Let him rot in ICU." He signed papers anyway. I have not signed anything to sell or encumber my home. Marisol handed the bailiff a stack. Exhibit D, she said, voice flat. The bailiff passed the affidavit to the clerk, who then read aloud, On August 14th, 2025, I heard the patient's son say, "Let him rot in ICU." He signed papers anyway. Eleanor's name was there, her license number printed, her handwriting on the bottom as a witness. I watched the judge's face as the words landed. He did not move, but his mouth thinned. Cross-examination began with a soft assault. My son's lawyer asked about memory, medication, my fall, pain meds, the usual small storms. I answered plainly, dates, receipts, where I kept my original trust. When they tried to press me on the handwriting, Marisol leaned forward and handed the clerk Exhibit G, a photocopy of the Rush Cellar packet, with the forged signature dated August 15th. I said what I knew. That signature leans left. I taught my son to write from the shoulder, pressure from the top. My name leans right because of the way I hold the pen. Look at the L in my last name, curved, steady. This one has a hesitant crook. The court looked at the exhibits. The small details matter, how a loop is closed, a line is too quick. Judges like patterns. Forensic handwriting isn't a movie trick. It's the way a life presses ink onto paper. Then Marisol brought Ortiz from Seabreeze to the stand. He read the bank's memo into the record. Any lien or loan attempt on 112 Bayshore Drive will trigger manual verification and review. No funds will be released without confirmation from the account holder. The memo had a date, August 23rd, and a stamp. That line of corporate language was simple, but to me it sounded like a lock slamming shut. Ortiz described the intercepted hard money term, sheet, the $2.4 million proposal, and how their system had flagged it and prevented the draw. Next, Marisol called Jonah. He swore he'd taken photos at Coconut Grove Diner dated August 23rd. My son across from a hard money broker with a document top line reading loan proposal, $2,400,000. Jonah's photos were grainy, But the timestamp was clear on the metadata, 08-23-2025, 12:05 p.m. The courtroom quieted to the sound of a dropped nail. My son's lawyer tried to undermine Jonah's methods. Camera angle, distance, but the photos held like witnesses. The broker's hand, the folder's edge, the way my son leaned in. It was a picture of intent. Then Judge Arroyo allowed a surprise. Bayshore titles emailed withdrawal, which Marisol had saved as Exhibit J. The subject line read, "Withdrawal from transaction due to conflicting authority claims." The email was dated August 31st. When the clerk read it, the room made a sound that was less than a sigh and more than a shuffle. The title company had backed off. That quiet retraction said more than any sermon. Finally, Marisol placed the rush seller packet up under the light. She asked me to look at the signature and tell the court if I'd made it. I said no, and my voice didn't wobble. She asked Elena to read her statement again. The nurse did, word for word. The judge's pen moved like a second hand. My son tried to speak, to explain, to say he'd meant well, that he only wanted to help with maintenance, with bills. He said a line that will stay with me. "Dad, I thought you wanted less hassle." I remember thinking, if you wanted less hassle, you could have asked. If you wanted the house, you could have built it yourself. Judge Arroyo leaned forward and asked a question that felt like a hinge. "Where is the signed authorization you allege exists?" My son's lawyer faltered. The answer was the silence in the room. The clerk double-checked the packet. The forger had tried to make the signature look right, but paper remembers the hand that makes it. After recess, the judge made a ruling on the temporary relief. He granted the TRO, language crisp and narrow, no encumbrance, no transfer, no listing, and no attempt to refinance until further order of this court. He added gravely that the state attorney's office would be notified for possible investigation into elder exploitation. He signed the order, and in the hushed room, the pen scratched the date, 9/03/2025. When the deputy handed a certified copy across to Marisol, the paper felt heavier than the binder. My son folded in on himself like an old nail left in the rain. He looked at me once, an odd, quick glance that carried something I used to call recognition, and then down at the floor, as if the courthouse had swallowed him whole. Outside, the sun stabbed the pavement hard, bright enough to make men squint and the sea glitter. Luis patted my elbow, eyes wet but steady. "You did it," he said. As we stepped down the courthouse steps, someone asked, "Mr. Any words?" I held up the copier warm TRO. "Keep your receipts," I said. "They'll tell the truth when others don't." The pen had scratched the date into the margin, 09/3/2025, and the sound of it seemed to echo in my bones. Justice, in this case, had a timestamp. The market closed for him at 10:47 a.m., not stocks, but doors. That was the time stamped on the first email that arrived the next morning. September 4th, 2025, subject line, formal disengagement notice, Bayshore title. The body of the email was short, almost cold. Effective immediately. Bayshore title is withdrawing from any and all dealings associated with 112 Bayshore Drive due to unresolved ownership disputes. Below that, a signature from their managing attorney. No apology, no small talk, just clean distance, the kind of line professionals draw when they realize they've been standing too close to a fire. At 11:03 a.m., another message came through, this time from the hard money lender. The same broker from the Coconut Grove diner. After internal review, it read, "We are rescinding the term sheet, dated August 23rd, 2025. No collateral will be accepted pending title clarification." In banker speak, that meant you're radioactive now, and by noon the dominoes had finished falling. My son's realtor, her office address stamped right there on Coral Way, sent a polite, almost embarrassed text. "Mr. I'm formally withdrawing representation. I wasn't aware of the full situation. I hope you and your family resolve this privately." Privately. Everyone always wants betrayal to be private once it goes public. At 2:12 p.m., Jonah sent over his final report. A tidy PDF with a photo I hadn't seen yet. My son and that same title runner, the woman in red, at the Palms Hotel rooftop bar. Jonah wrote, "No criminal conduct captured, but optics strongly support premeditated document transfer." He ended with, "Use this wisely." I didn't reply. I just printed it, hole-punched it, and slid it behind Exhibit G in the binder. The binder that had now become less a file and more a shield. That afternoon, Marisol called from her office. "You'll be getting a notice from the state attorney's office," she said. Judge Arroyo forwarded the exploitation referral himself. "They want to schedule an intake on Monday, September 8th. Elena has agreed to testify to her affidavit in person." "Elena?" I asked. "She insisted," Marisol said. "Told me if he could say that in a hospital, he can face what comes after." I felt my throat tighten. That woman had heard the worst words a son can speak, and still stood tall enough to sign her name to them. After the call, I walked the house. Not for inspection, but for air. The place felt alive again, quiet, steady, humming with the sound of its own safety. At the kitchen counter, I found a manila folder half tucked behind the microwave, left behind from one of my son's earlier visits. Inside was a back of napkin net sheet, a realtor's scribble. Sell 10 meters, walk away 7.8 meters after fees and debts. Debts I didn't owe. His handwriting looked rushed, desperate. The math was sloppy, but the intent was sharp. I took a photo, sealed the napkin in an evidence envelope, and labeled it 9/4/25, found kitchen, son's handwriting. Then I slid it into the binder next to Ortiz's freeze memo. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from him. Just 6 words. "Enjoy your victory, old man. Congrats." No apology. No admission. Just ego trying to sound like indifference. I stared at the screen for a long minute before replying. "You will not step foot on this property again without counsel. Present. Ever." The 3 dots blinked for a while, then disappeared. Silence. That was the first honest thing between us in months. Around sunset, Luis came by with 2 cups of Cuban coffee. "You look lighter," he said. "Paper weighs less than guilt," I told him. We sat on the dock as the sun sank over Biscayne Bay. The sky turned the color of burnished brass. In my lap was the certified court order, Judge Arroyo's signature still visible through the thin envelope window. I smoothed the page flat against my thigh and traced the date with my finger. 09/03/2025. Behind us, the old boathouse padlock clicked shut, the one I'd changed a week before. It sounded like punctuation. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like closure. Luis raised his cup. "To what's ours," he said. "To what's earned," I corrected. When the last light disappeared over the bay, I took out my old carpenter's pencil, the one that started it all, and drew a straight line across the back of a blank envelope. I stopped right at the edge, where paper met air, and I whispered the words that had become my quiet motto: "Straight lines only," because revenge wasn't the storm. It was the blueprint I'd built to survive it. Justice didn't roar. It filed. On September 8th, I found myself back in the courthouse. Different floor, smaller room, same chill in the air. The sign on the frosted glass read, "State Attorney Intake, Financial Crimes Division." Inside sat a young prosecutor with a notepad, a paralegal with a recorder, and a paper cup of stale coffee that looked like it had been there longer than the desk. I handed over my binder. "Everything's in here," I said. The prosecutor, Mr. Kaplan, late 30s, tired eyes, flipped through the tabs like he was skimming a Bible. "You built houses, didn't you?" He asked. "Yes," I said. "Still do in my head." He nodded, eyes catching on Exhibit D, Elena's affidavit, the one with the line that started it all. "Let him rot in ICU." Then he glanced at the bank freeze memo, the fake seller packet, the napkin math, and finally the photos from the Palms rooftop. "This," he said quietly, tapping the photo, "is why paper matters more than people sometimes. You can't cross-examine a timestamp." Elena arrived a few minutes later, still in scrubs, her badge clipped to her pocket. She looked nervous but determined. When she swore in, her voice didn't shake. "I heard him say it," she repeated. Those exact words. Kaplan asked me to confirm the timeline. "August 14th to September 3rd, I said. 3 weeks. That's how long it took to lose a son and keep a house. He wrote something down, nodded slowly, and said, "We'll open a preliminary case file for attempted exploitation of an elderly person. That doesn't mean prosecution yet. It means we see enough to dig." "Dig," I told him. "It's all there. You just have to follow the receipts." After signing the statement, I walked out with Elena. We stood by the vending machines in the hallway. The kind of place where small talk feels bigger than it is. "You saved me," I said. She shook her head. "No, you saved yourself." I just wrote it down. That night I met Marisol and Luis back at the house. The bay wind was picking up again, carrying the smell of salt and rain. On the table, we laid out everything one last time before filing the quiet title action, the final legal nail to seal ownership under my name permanently. The stack looked almost ceremonial. 2019. Mortgage payoff letter 2020-2025. Property tax receipts insurance binder June 1st, 2025. Camera logs showing the 2:03 a.m. gate. Ping locksmith invoice 229. Freeze memo AUG 23 Bayshore. Title withdrawal email AUG 31. Realtor withdrawal text Sept 4. Elena's affidavit PI photos from Jonah, every date, every number. Every stamp was a heartbeat in the same rhythm. Truth. "Once this quiet title is approved," Marisol said, "his claims vanish. Forever. Even if he tries again, it'll bounce off like rain on tile," I nodded. "Good, let it rain." Before she left, I gave her an envelope, a letter I'd added to my trust that morning. "If I die," I said, "the remainder goes to a carpentry scholarship at Miami Dade Technical. Kids who work with their hands. No one should have to beg for nails." She smiled a little misty. "That's poetic, Mr. It's practical," I said. "Wood remembers the hands that shape it." 2 days later, she called with the news. The quiet title was granted. The judge wrote clear continuous ownership in the order. "You're done." I hung up the phone, sat on the porch, and exhaled in a way I hadn't since before the fall. The air tasted like sea and sawdust. At 4:15 p.m., my son's attorney sent an email. The subject line, "Proposal for Reconciliation." He wrote, "My client wishes to initiate a reunification dialogue contingent upon private mediation." I read it twice before replying. Restitution first. Written apology to Nurse Elena. Full repayment of costs, $3,000 investigator, $229 locksmith, and attorney fees. After that, maybe a conversation. The response came an hour later. "My client declines." I stared at that word, declines, until it blurred. Then I smiled, because it meant the door had finally shut. That weekend, Luis came over to help me change the boathouse padlock I started walking it like I used to, one slow lap at a time. From the dock to the porch to the long hallway where my wife's voice still seemed to echo. The north wall still held our son's kindergarten painting. A crooked house with a blue roof, stick figure family, and the word home in capital letters. The paint had faded to a soft grey, but the strokes were still there. Steady, certain. I stood there for a long time, remembering the afternoon we hung it. My wife laughed, because he'd painted the sky green. "He sees the world differently," she said. "And that's a good thing." I used to believe that too. Now I just wished he'd seen people differently, the way trust bends when you lean on it too hard. I moved through the rooms slowly, like an inspector checking foundations. The south window still showed the bay. The same view that got us through 2 hurricanes and 1 long illness. I ran my fingers along the sill I'd carved myself 20 years ago. I could still feel the groove where the chisel slipped, and I never filled it in. I kept it that way to remind myself, flaws make things real. On the dining table sat the cedar box I'd built years back to hold our family receipts. Now it held something else, every paper that proved I'd kept my promises. The 2019 mortgage payoff, the tax receipts, the insurance renewals, the affidavits. I stacked them in order, each one like a brick in a wall I'd built against oblivion. Outside, the afternoon light was soft and gold, the kind carpenters call finishing light. Luis stopped by with 2 coffees and didn't say much. He didn't have to. He set one beside me and watched the bay. "You ever going to talk to him again?" he asked finally. I shook my head. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. Love doesn't mean letting someone take the roof off your life." He nodded, eyes on the horizon. "Still your blood, though." "Blood doesn't build," I said. "Hands do." After he left, I sat at the table writing a thank you card to Elena. Inside, I tucked a check, small but enough to cover her next semester at the nursing school she'd mentioned. I wrote, "For standing up when it mattered most." From one builder to another. Before sealing it, I added one last line. "You didn't just witness truth. You protected it." That evening I took my coffee to the dock. The bay rippled with thin silver lines, pelicans diving and lifting in lazy rhythm. The air smelled of salt and wood varnish. I thought about all the fathers who'd worked their whole lives just to hand something down, and the ones who'd lost everything because they didn't know they needed proof. For them, I whispered into the wind, "Keep your papers close and your peace closer. Your pension isn't just a check, it's your proof of life." I thought about the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge burns the past. Justice builds a future where the same thing can't happen again. I hadn't destroyed my son. I just refused to let him destroy me. When the sun began to drop, I took the carpenter's pencil from my shirt pocket, the same one that had sat atop the courtroom binder. The wood was warm from my palm, the lead dulled from years of use. I pressed it gently against the railing and drew one clean line across the grain, from edge to edge. Straight, steady, final. The bay caught the light and threw it back at me like a mirror. "I didn't get even," I said aloud. "I got straight." And that line glowing in the last streak of sunset looked like peace. He wanted my house. What he lost was his home. It was late September when the certified letter arrived, plain white envelope, my son's handwriting crooked on the front. The kind of scrawl that used to fill my fridge with spelling tests, and now just carried apologies that came too late. I turned it over twice before opening it. Inside was one page. No greeting, no date, no weight. Just, "Dad, I made mistakes. I never meant to hurt you. I'm struggling now. If you can help me get back on my feet, I'd be grateful." No signature flourish, just that single tired line. I read it twice and set it on the counter beside the coffee pot. For a moment I almost smiled, because even his apology sounded like an invoice. By now I'd learned that forgiveness isn't free. It's an investment, and not every borrower deserves a second loan. So instead of writing back by hand, I called Marisol. "Send him a response," I said. "Through counsel. Keep it clean." She drafted it just how I wanted. "Dear Mr. In response to your letter dated September 29th, 2025, please find enclosed a formal boundary agreement. Future contact may occur only through counsel and in writing. Conditions for reconciliation remain unchanged. Restitution of incurred costs. Written apology to Nurse Elena and acknowledgement of the court order of September 3rd. Until then, no contact." I read it once, signed it without trembling, and added a note at the bottom. "You wanted my house. What you lost was your home." The next day, Marisol mailed it by certified post. Weeks passed. No answer. Maybe he moved out of Miami. Maybe he learned what silence tastes like when it's of your own making. The truth is, I stopped checking the mailbox for his name. Instead, I found myself back in my workshop, the one behind the boathouse, where the smell of sawdust felt like medicine. The light through the window landed on my old workbench, the same one I built in 1988 from leftover pine. Every scratch told a story. The year my wife and I restored the kitchen cabinets, the night I made a toy sailboat for our boy's 5th birthday. That bench had outlasted everything: storms, termites, grief, even greed. It deserved a new life, so I sanded it clean, polished the edges, and taped a note to the underside in thick black ink. "Measure twice. Cut once, and if you love someone, don't cut corners." The next morning, I donated the bench to the Miami-Dade Community College Carpentry Department. The same place that would one day receive my scholarship fund. When the delivery driver asked what name to put on the form, I said, "No name. Just call it from one old builder to the next." That evening, I walked the dock one last time before closing the binder for good. The bay was quiet, the sky pale gold. Pelicans skimmed the water like grey ghosts. The wind smelled of varnish and rain. I took the carpenter's pencil from my pocket and rolled it between my fingers. You can't fix everything you build, I thought, but you can make sure it stands straight before you walk away. Inside, the house hummed with the same peace it had before all of this began. My wife's photo still hung by the stairs, the frame a little tilted, the way she liked it. I straightened it once, smiled, then left it crooked again, because some memories are meant to lean. Before turning off the lights, I whispered the only line that still mattered. "You didn't lose me. You gave me away." And as the house settled into its nighttime stillness, the bay breeze moving softly through the screens, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I wasn't defending my past, I was living in it, peacefully. Justice hadn't just given me back my home, it had given